Alright, so this is going to be part 4 to What If Deku Was Accelerator. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness, 'cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness, that I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so in the last part we just got done with Deku and the rest of Class 1A being at the USJ, them finding the Nomu, and the League of Villains as a whole. So at this point we're going to be talking about a little bit before the sports festival and then onwards from there, and we'll see how far we get. If you like this series, please give it a like, as it does help out this series and the channel as a whole, and it lets me know that you want more of this series. And if you haven't already, try to check out my other what ifs, as they're pretty good too. Other than that, please subscribe, it helps out the channel. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the story. So last off, we ended with Deku meeting a government worker, them basically talking about what Deku's been up to lately and who he's friends with. So we're at that point where Deku is basically hanging out with Yarashi, not really training as he doesn't see the need to, rather focusing on school instead, as he wants to keep his grades up. Now Yarashi would be trying to train very vigorously as he wants to be up there with the rest of the class, and he wants to be someone that can be a great hero in the future. Not only that, but he really wants to show up Todoroki. So from time to time he would ask Deku to help out with his training, as Deku's able to mimic his quirk due to him manipulating the laws of physics with the wind. So Deku would just give him some pointers to help him out with his training. He would tell Deku that Todoroki is probably not going to use his fire until he needs it to, let's say, melt the ice or to keep his skin from developing frostbite. So he tells Yarashi that he probably doesn't have to worry for that, but just in case, it might be a good idea to maybe funnel the air towards yourself and not letting him have too much, as his flames would not be as strong as they normally would be. He also gives a pointer on how he could get through his ice by essentially thinning his air to the point where it becomes almost a lethal weapon. Essentially, he has so much pressure in such a tiny area that it becomes almost an air blade. So that's what he's planning to do against Todoroki in case they have to go against each other, because they do have somewhat of an idea of what's going to happen for the sports festival, as it's an annual thing, and not only that, but it's also bigger than the Olympics in terms of viewership. So we could skip a few days to the day of the sports festival. At this point, everyone's been training really hard to see if they can win. Now, they don't have complete confidence in themselves because, well, Deku's there. But at the same time, they don't really know if he's gonna put his entire effort into it, as it doesn't really seem like something that he would try to do. But people like Bakugo and Todoroki do know that he's gonna try his best. Not only that, but also Yarashi. Now, it would get to the point where they would have the person making the speech. I think that Bakugo would probably still be the one who makes the speech, as he was the one who got the highest score during the entry exam, although Deku did have a pretty good performance during the recommendation exam. But just like in canon, Bakugo would be the one making the speech. His speech would basically be the same as it was in canon, but Deku's not really reacting. He sees that Bakugo is confident, but he doesn't worry at all. Deku at this point knows that he's gonna win. He doesn't really care about this. He thinks that it's kind of a chore to do, as he doesn't see the point in doing it for him. He's not seeing any growth really, and he's almost stagnant. He has all this great power, but not really anyone to challenge him. He kind of just likes being almost a normal kid, hanging out with his friend Yarashi and helping them improve, rather than him improving himself, as, like I said before, he doesn't see much growth in him. So this is where the first event would start, this being the race. Now Deku would take a lead almost right away, and the way that he would do this is because if you see in the anime, a lot of people get stuck through the entryway because everyone's trying to go out at once. So what Deku would do is basically push everyone out of the way, making the ground beneath them kind of rumble. Having the majority of people out of the way, this is where he makes his move to go forward, and the rest of Class 1A does as well. Now, Deku is basically the fastest at this point, as he's just able to just manipulate everything around him to go faster. As he would go down the track, this is when the 0 pointers would come, and Deku would just touch one of the robots and it would basically completely fall over, as if it was completely overwhelmed. Now, it is, like I keep saying, this quirk is very, very overpowered, and I suggest watching a certain magical index if you haven't seen it already. Anyways, he continues on, and as he gets to the minefield, he would step on one of the mines and they would explode in his face, but again, he still has that force field around him, which would basically make him reverse the explosion. Doing this would cause other explosions and they would just be a chain reaction. But on the other side of the smoke, when Deku gets out of it, he is completely fine without a scratch or even dirt on him, and he would get first place. Leaving a trail behind him, people would go through that way, making it easier for them to get through. So Bakugo and Todoroki would be neck and neck, as they don't have to worry about the mines because Deku basically cleared the way. With that being said, it's just them neck and neck until finally Yorushi would actually pass both of them. Using his power of wind manipulation, he's basically spiraling like a bullet through the air, making him travel a lot faster. Not only that, but he was already faster than Todoroki at the recommendation exam, and he's been training just as hard as everyone else, so it would make sense that he would still be faster than them. And Bakugo wasn't much faster than Todoroki in canon, so this would make sense. I think the wind that would get pushed between the two, that being Todoroki and Bakugo, would actually mess up Bakugo more than Todoroki, as Bakugo works on the explosions from his hands, while Todoroki is from the ice. So I think in this case, Todoroki would get third, while Bakugo gets fourth place. That means he doesn't get a headband. So when it comes to the cavalry battle, Deku would be looking for teammates, as there wouldn't be a lot of people that would try to go with him since he has the #1 headband. And his friend Yorushi can't be on his team since he also has a headband, so he has to get people from his own class that understands him. So he would pretty much get the same, group that he got in canon, that being Ochako, Tokiyami, and Mei. So in this case, it would be kind of a stomp to anyone who would try to go near him, as again, he could just put up his reflection wall. That being said, once people understand what's happening, they're more eager to go after, Deku, other than the fact that he has the highest headband. Because he's such a big priority, the other two are also getting some attention, but not as much as Deku. This gives Bakugo the opportunity to get other people's headbands as they're after Deku and not really pay attention to him. As more and more people try to go for Deku, they quickly realize that they can't. Some sort of force is stopping them. They think that he might have some sort of telekinesis, but that isn't it. It's something more. And everyone that's in the audience sees this, and it's kind of exciting. Just a bit. After that, once they realize they can't go for Deku, they would try to go for the other two, that being Yorushi and Todoroki. Now, with the two there being the head, it'd be a lot easier for them to, protect themselves because of the way that their quirks work, that being the wind and ice, both being able to make barriers out of their respective elements. And with not a real way to get close to them easily, people like Monoma would not be able to, touch them, therefore not getting their quirks. And again, like in canon, he would not make it to the next round. After the timer would go off, the ones that would go to the next round would be the ones normally in canon, plus Yorushi. Here's where it gets interesting, as Ojiro would still warn Deku just like he did in canon, so he has somewhat of a reason to be wary of Shinso, because his quirk isn't physical, so he might not be able to stop it like the others. It having to do with some sort of manipulation of the mind has him a little bit worried, so he's going to be super cautious. In this fight with Shinso, it would be Deku trying to end it somewhat fast, as he doesn't really care for showing off, as what's important is that he gets the first place, as that alone should give him some, a lot of options when it comes to his internship. So when the fight starts, this is where Shinso would try to bait Deku into talking to him, and Deku would sense a weird frequency coming from his voice. This making him suspicious, he would not talk back. Instead, he would block out the sound, so he would not be able to hear Shinso on whatever he was saying. This would give him enough confidence to actually go and attack Shinso, with Shinso not really having a way to defend himself other than the normal means. It's not really too effective, as Deku could just touch him and launch him off the stage. He doesn't even actually have to touch him for this. He could just manipulate the air and basically blow him away, kind of like Yarashi. So Deku doesn't even have to move from where he's at to push him away. With this, Deku wins pretty much in 10 seconds, as he doesn't really care for Shinso, but he could tell that he's sad. He doesn't really console him in this, as it's not really in his personality to do so, and he's not really worried about other people. Right now, he only really cares for those who are close to him, and Shinso isn't, so he wouldn't go out of his way to comfort him. That being said, this is where Deku would just walk past Shinso, and Shinso would expect him to, well, laugh at him or something to that effect, but Deku doesn't belittle him. He just doesn't care, and Shinso is a little bit, I guess, relieved at that point. Not entirely, as he tried so hard to get this far, and there are those who see potential within him, but it's cut short as, well, Deku stopped him right there. Other fights that would be different would be ones that involve Bakugo. Because Bakugo wasn't in the, the runner-ups for first, second, or third, he's gonna have to fight other people. So, instead of the normal fight between him and Uraraka, instead it's gonna be Yarashi versus Uraraka. This fight would be somewhat similar, as she would try to basically touch Yarashi to push him away, but even if that were to happen, he's a complete counter to her quirk, as if he starts to float, he could just use his wind to maneuver himself. So it's a lot easier for him to just win this fight. So he does so rather quickly without giving her a chance to shine like she did in canon. Because of that, it's seen as a kind of one-sided fight, if that makes sense. It was a bad matchup, and there's really nothing she could have done about it. But at least she tried and didn't give up right away. So, with that being said, let's get into the next fights. Next fight would be Kaminari versus Bakugo. Now, obviously in their stage of development, Bakugo has the upper hand, so it really wouldn't be too hard for him to attack Kaminari. The only problem is his, well, electricity, his indiscriminate shock, if you will, that will just go everywhere. Although Bakugo can have a little bit of range to his attacks, so can Kaminari. Now this fight wouldn't be all too decisive in my opinion, at least at the beginning, as Bakugo would try to adapt to his style at first, but after a little bit he would have, and I think Bakugo is just overall stronger than Kaminari at this point, and therefore would have just wiped them out after a couple minutes of adapting to his style. So after that, we could get to the next fights. This being Todoroki versus Deku. Now immediately as the fight begins, Todoroki would try to engulf the entire arena with ice, trying to trap him, kind of like how he did to Sero during their fight. Now, from the audience perspective, it would just seem like all this ice just in case Deku, but in reality, there was this kind of almost pocket around Deku, and none of the ice touched him. So, it seems like this is going to be an easy fight, but then the ice starts to melt in front of Deku, revealing that he was never touched. This is where, well, Todoroki has to up his game, trying to cover him up with more and more ice, trying to just engulf him over and over, seeing if there's some sort of opening, but nothing happens. Deku starts to rotate the air around him, heating it up, melting the ice as he goes through, and as he's just walking forward, the ice that's being placed in front of him either gets melted or thrown away, if that makes sense. And he gets closer to Todoroki, and Todoroki can't do nothing about it, and he's getting a little bit scared. And this is where Deku tells him, so you're the son of the number 2 hero, why don't you use that fire quirk of yours? I know that's the reason why you don't get frostbite. So why do you only use half your power? Do you think you really can defeat me with that kind of level? You're not even trying at this point. Why don't you just resign? Just give up. If you're not gonna face me with all your power, you can't be a hero. You're limiting yourself. This is where Deku would just constantly just go forward, and this is what Todoroki gets mad at. He's mad that he can't get past Deku with just his power. He doesn't want to rely on his father's quirk, quote unquote, and it just keeps building up inside until he just releases all this ice, and it's so much that his fire side has a hard time keeping up with him, keeping him from, freezing himself. And eventually Deku just face to face with him, and he tells him that it's his loss. And right as Todoroki's about to use his fire, Deku just pushes him and he gets slammed into the wall as Todoroki tries to slow him down with the different eyes, trying to redirect the momentum, but it doesn't work. He just crashes through and he hits the side where Cementos would have just made a bunch of walls to block it. Todoroki then would be sent to the infirmary and Deku would be declared the winner. Now for the next fight, it's gonna be Todoroki versus Yorushi. Now this fight should be interesting as both of them have very interesting quirks that are the top of their class. Both are very powerful and use their hands as the main method of manipulation. Now that being said, I think I will save it for the next part. So if you got to this far, this is gonna be the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. With that being said, everything after this point will be in the next video, like I said. But yeah, if you liked it, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, as that does help with the channel. And if you want to see these videos early, you can do so at patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan. There you also have a chance of getting a drawing from me, and the higher your tier is, the higher chance you have of getting a drawing from me. Other than that, it only takes $1. It'll be linked in the description. And if you haven't already, please check out my Twitter. There I post a lot of my art, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it'll be posted there first. So anyways, with that being said, we gotta say a shout out to the patrons over on Patreon. So we have in our gold tier, Nippy Director, Kenny, and Dwayne Fenn. In our platinum tier, we have Lyco. So if you want to join them, it'll be linked in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan. So with that being said, this is gonna be the video. So yeah.